Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and recently Journey Together was not officially fully revealed. However, Battle Partners, the Japanese expansion, which is making up the bulk of Journey Together, was officially revealed. All the cards, the 100 cards from that set are revealed, and then some of the other cards are from the starter deck generations or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, but regardless, some of those cards came out in Prismatic Evolutions. Most of them are bad, but a few are good, and a few of the good ones are actually in the new expansion, which is coming post rotation. I'm not talking about exactly how good these cards are, how they're going to impact the metagame, or what exactly they are, but I'm going to talk about today how these cards are callbacks to older cards, and we're predominantly going to be looking at PokemonProxies.com. This is the website I do use to find English translations of these new cards. These are not the official translations, though, so the attack names may be wrong. And if Pokemon is trying to make callbacks with these cards, they might actually change the attack name to be similar to older cards. But with that out of the way, let's hop right into the set. We'll actually start off with Blaziken EX. Blaziken EX is a card that has an attack, but it has an ability that says once during your turn, you may attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. Some of these associations I'm less confident in than others, and also comment down below if I do end up missing any. This is just based on the knowledge that I have from playing the Pokemon TCG, and I noticed just a ton of these when looking through new card reveals pretty consistently from the set. But Blaziken EX, I believe, is a reference to Blaziken from Dragon's Majesty, which is its ability lets you accelerate a fire energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. These abilities are similar, but obviously they're both Blaziken. And this Blaziken is actually directly a reference to Blaziken from apparently Ruby Sapphire and Power Keepers. I did not play during this era, but I am aware of this card, and it's the same as its Pokemon or its Pokepower is, which is called an ability here, is the same as the ability on the other Blaziken. So I believe this is an intentional reference. It might just be a thematically similar thing because if you don't know, I imagine most people know this, even if they don't necessarily recognize it. But Pokemon, obviously tries to make the cards based on the video game, Pokemon. And so certain Pokemon have different themes just naturally. And so this Blaziken EX is in that same theme. It could just be that's the only reason, but it could be an intentional reference as well. Now moving on to cards from Battle Partners. We first have Butterfree, which has an attack that is flip 4 coins and you do some damage for each heads. And then if 2 or more are heads, your opponent's actor is now paralyzed. This is an attack we've seen um, a bunch of times before, very similarly. I don't think this is actually a callback to a certain card, but we have seen things like this, like this Gliscor, which is actually in standard right now, is a card that does that. It's not a particularly good card, nor is Butterfree, but regardless, there are cards like that. Then we have Maractus. This one has very common, like two very common things it does. If it's hit and knocked out, it puts damage counters, and it can also stop retreating. We've seen the corner attack a bunch of times. This ability, I know we've seen before. We've seen very similar things to it, but that is something to keep in mind. However, the first actual definitive reference I have here, I'm pretty sure this is intentional, is Accelgor. I recently talked about this on the podcast. I do with Uncommon Fossil, and that card is, oh, apparently it's already in the database, the new one, but the Accelgor, which we'll talk about a little bit later and just touch on, is very similar, in my opinion, to the one from Dark Explorers, which was a good card. This new Accelgor is not particularly good, but for one grass and one colorless, so 2 energy, you do 50, you have 100 HP, and your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned, and you switch this with one of your bench Pokemon. It's a hit and run, disruptive style attack. And this old Accelgor has deck and cover. This for 2 colorless, so it is 2 energy. It's better stat wise for its time, I think. I mean, also you had level ball, but it's much easier to attack with. That's the big thing. And you also paralyze, which is better than confusion. And then you also poison, and you shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. Also, sorry, my voice is a little under the weather right now, but this is a hit and run style attack that also does disruptive special condition. There are 3. There's paralysis, sleep, and then confusion. Paralysis is the best. I don't actually know which is. I'd say confusion is better than sleep, but I really don't know. And then poison, we see that on both of them as well. And hit and run, it is different hit and run, but I do believe that this is a reference to that old Accelgor. Meowscarada has its ability. We've seen this ability a few times, which says once during your turn you may use this ability, and if this is on your bench, you may switch it in with your active Pokemon. We've seen this ability, I think most iconically on Keldeo EX from Boundaries Crossed. There we go, and it was called Russian. Then we also saw the ability Russian, I believe, on Solgaleo from Celebrations. Yeah, it is the same name. This Solgaleo was directly a reference to that Keldeo, I'm pretty sure. Don't know if there was one before the Keldeo. There might be, and I'm just forgetting. But Meowscarada has the same ability. They're both stage 2s, and their attacks are both 2 colorless as well. Probably not a reference. Probably just cards with similar things going on, but it is the same ability, and that is coming back, which is kind of cool. Magmortar is a card that is actually, I didn't realize this. I knew there were cards. So what its ability says during Pokemon checkup, put 3 more damage counters on burn Pokemon, and then your attack is for 3 energy, 2 fire, and a colorless 90. And on a coin flip, your opponent's active is now burned. I knew there were cards kind of like this, but in looking at things for again, when these were revealed, which was right before the podcast I recorded with Uncommon Fossil, I found this Pyroar, which I kind of forgot about. Its attack is essentially the exact same. It is 1 colorless instead of a fire, but it's the same exact thing. Aside from that, its ability is 4 damage cast instead of 2 for a burn Pokemon, so it works. It does not stack, and then it also is less burn damage, but very, very similar cards. They're not just kind of similar, so yeah, this might actually be a reference. I don't know why they'd be referencing this card. It's not particularly good. I've never really seen this card played. I don't think. I might have once or twice, but regardless, this Magmortar is super similar. It's not just a little similar. Then we have, I'm trying to think. Ludicolo is kind of a reference, or it's not a reference, but it's similar to, I believe, Leavanny. That's the one I can think of, which says your grass Pokemon. Oh wait, no, that's not the right Pokemon. I guess I'm thinking of Kricketune, where you get 40 more HP on your grass Pokemon. Um, okay, I cannot spell. Kricketune from Astral Radiance, which is still in standard, but regardless, I don't think that's a reference. We have seen effects like this before. It's different though. Then we have a bunch of generic cards here. The Ionos Pokemon, a lot of the Trainers Pokemon. I mean, obviously we had Trainers Pokemon before, but the new trainers are N, Iono, Hop, and Lily, which are all way newer than the old trainers. I guess N would be the closest, but these probably, I think a bunch of them don't have references. A few do though, which we will get to. Iono's Kilowatt was actually really similar to Revavroom in effect. Definitely not a reference though. Lily's Clefairy EX is definitely a reference though. And by the way, this card we have seen it's official, like this is the official version of it. I mean, okay, this is as a proxy. This exact image isn't, but the attack name, the ability name, the text, that is all official because we saw this card revealed at the World Championship. Lily's Clefairy EX has 2 things. That's ability, saying that the weakness of each of your opponent's Dragon Pokemon in play is now Psychic, and apply weaknesses ×2. So if you don't know, I imagine most people who play the TCG know this, but Dragon Pokemon, I'll pull up Dragapult EX, it does not have weakness, right? So that's partially why, Pokemon wants to add in a weakness to these cards. But if you didn't know, a Pokemon like, Dragonite EX, or a regular Dragonite here, has no weakness. But then you look at this Dragonite, this one, I think it's an iconic one, but it has fairy weakness. Of course, fairy type is not in the TCG, or it's not in the TCG anymore. It isn't expanded, but right now there's only 10 types in standard. And by the way, subscribe to 10 types. Just want to sneak that one in. But it is weak to fairy, and fairy Pokemon are now Clefairy, which obviously, well, okay, it was like colorless. Clefairy is weird, but then it got fairy cards, right? But now it's psychic. All fairy type Pokemon are now moved to psychic. If there's like a dual type, it could be its other type, of course. But Clefairy is now psychic, and psychic, or I'll pull up Gardevoir. Gardevoir is a Pokemon that in the video game is both, I believe, psychic and fairy, I think. And so you have a Pokemon like Gardevoir EX, which is weak to darkness and resists fighting. This is the normal weakness for psychic Pokemon, weakness and resistance, but then the some other Gardevoirs are just weak to metal, no resistance. This is what all fairy Pokemon look like. This means that now Dragon Pokemon are weak to fairy again. That's kind of the reason why this is. I don't exactly know if I called a reference, but it kind of is. Not just a reference to a card or anything like that, but definitely is a thing that is, it is a very intentional thing. Which I figured is worth mentioning. Also, someone did submit a custom card. This is a while ago. That was very similar to this, actually before this card got revealed. But then we have Full Moon Rondo, which is definitely also a reference, and we have cards with the attack name Blizzard Rondo. Okay, yeah. So there's just apparently there's Star Rondo on Mawile V-Star. I did not know that, but there is what's it? Burning Rondo. There is Blizzard Rondo, and there is Lightning Rondo, and this does 20 damage, 20 more for each bench Pokemon both yours and your opponent's. Same exact thing as Clefairy EX. I have no idea why it's joining in on the what is this? The Legendary Beasts. I don't know if this is the right trio name, but regardless, it's the same as those. That's directly a callback. Not sure why. I'm not familiar enough with the lore, but definitely a thing there. Mr. Mime, we've seen attacks like this all the time with Mimic, but nothing crazy there. Metagross, we've seen attacks like this, like doing more damage for bench Pokemon. There's like a Kling like this. I don't know if there's a Metagross like this. I can't think of one. And Sigilyph here, Victory Sigil. Sigil is the same as Unknown V, I think. Oh, that's Victory Symbol. But similar thing here. I'm not really familiar with attacks like this. They're generally not. The only one I know is Unknown V. There might be others that I don't know. But regardless, that is a thing here. Lotus for Bombay, we've seen cards like this before. Same thing with the Lotus Company, pretty generic cards here. Mamoswine EX might be a reference to Nidoqueen. I'm really not sure at all. It's probably not, but I do want to talk about this card because it's an iconic card from theme format, which is probably my favorite format. I mean, standard kind of is the TCG, but if I didn't say standard, I'd probably say theme. And Mamoswine EX has its ability letting you search for a Pokemon each turn. That's the same ability as Nidoqueen, which does more damage for each of your benched evolution Pokemon. Mamoswine EX specifically does more damage for each of your bench stage 2 Pokemon, so different cards here. Not really sure if they are references or if they're just similar cards thematically in terms of like how they play. So it's probably just a coincidence, but they are cards that are actually pretty similar to each other. Then we have, Lycanroc's a pretty classic card design of accelerating energies, like certain synergies here. Nothing super crazy, nothing probably of reference. A lot of these cards we've just seen very similar things to before, like Weezing. Its attack is actually really similar to a recent Miltank printed. Wait, is that card? I think it was in the most recent set. I think it was from the starter decks actually. Yeah, it was. So regardless, we see stuff like this all the time. However, Tyranitar is definitely, Tyranitar might be a reference. Tyranitar says, well, it's in the active, its ability. Your opponent cannot play any items from their hand. This card reminds me a lot of Gothitelle. I was like, what's that Pokemon that looks kind of like Gardevoir? That's not the right one. Gothitelle from, what set was this? From Emerging Powers. There we go. It's an ability called Magic Room. I'm not super familiar with this card. I have certainly seen it, but I just forgot its ability name. But as long as it's in the active, I mean, it's the same thing. Your opponent can't play any items, and this card was paired with played in a deck called Accelgor Gothitelle, which I thought was really good. Maybe I'm just I'm misremembering it. I think it's better than it was, but regardless, okay, maybe my page is loading slowly too. But you have Gothitelle and you have Accelgor. You'd attack with Accelgor, switch into the Gothitelle with your hit and run attack. That was the idea here. Ultimately, did have a card called Floatstone to let you switch back into the Accelgor, but you could apply a special condition paralysis plus item lock. You can do that with Accelgor plus Tyranitar. This very well may be an intentional callback. I'm not sure though. Then we come to probably the reference that most people are familiar, like the one that was talked about the most, probably because it was like super intentional, but that's Ed's Zoroark EX, which is actually really similar to like Mew VMAX in terms of, I think, thematic, or I don't know if thematically, but in terms of kind of archetype stuff with a bunch of your attackers and your engines like working together, but it's actually because you copy attacks as well, but it's definitely a reference to Zoroark GX. Zoroark GX is an all-time great card. It's probably I don't know. It's really hard to rank all-time great cards, but it was probably the most defining card of its era, and its ability is Trade, which is the same ability as Zoroark EX. Trade says you just discard a card from your hand and you get to draw 2 cards. This is actually the same ability. Well, it's the same ability and effect as cards like Empoleon from, I believe, Dark Explorers, Curlier from Solar Tempest, Chichino from Sword and Shield, and I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting, but there's also Lipard, which is okay, I cannot spell. There we go. Lipard from Brilliant Stars, which actually has the same, effect of its ability, but it's also the same name in Trade, which Lipard was actually also a reference to Ed's Zoroark GX. I'm pretty sure Ed's Zoroark EX is referencing specifically this card, not the Lipard. And because they're the same Pokemon, essentially. Then you have Trickster, which is 2 darkness and it copies an attack. Though it is one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks and your GX attack. Night Joker copies one of your benched ends Pokemon's attacks. Not really sure if that's intentionally referential. Zoroark is definitely a Pokemon that copies attacks a lot. This is Zoroark, switches into other Pokemon, and then um, which of these? Oh yeah, this Zoroark copies attacks. There might be another one that I'm forgetting as well, but that is the thing that Zoroark, of course, it does. It like becomes other Pokemon. Again, Pangoro has something like Torment, which we've seen a lot of times. It's pretty generic stuff here. Hop's Corviknight EX and Hop's Zacian EX are actually like really similar, which is kind of weird. I don't know why they're so similar. Hop's Corviknight EX and Hop's Zacian EX, their first attack for 1 colorless does a certain amount of damage to your opponent's active, and then that same amount to their benched. Well, it's the same amount on the card. You'll be probably buffing the active and not the bench damage, but regardless, Hop's Corviknight EX, it's 50 and 50, and then Hop's Zacian EX, it's 30 and 30. Then their second attack is for mostly it's 2 or 3 metal and then a colorless. They're different in their effects, but Hop's Corviknight does 150, and then it takes 60 less next turn. We've seen Corviknights take less damage, not a crazy thing, but it doesn't seem super like directly referential. Then Hop's Zacian EX here says you do Brave Slash, which I don't know if this is the confirmed attack name, but you do for metal colorless 240 during your next turn. This Pokemon can't use Brave Slash. Brave Slash is certainly an attack name that is very referential to Zacian V's. Also, I need to open this card up for later, but Zacian V. Okay. There we go. I'm kind of tired right now. Zacian V with Brave Blade, which seems very similar to Brave Slash, which is 3 metal and cannot attack next turn. And also, there's a tool that reduces the attack cost by 1 colorless. And so that attack cost reduction means that they have the same attack cost there, which is kind of funny. So that's pretty clearly a reference. Additionally, this is where we start to talk about the Hops cards. Hops Zacian EX. Okay, so there is some way to damage buff it. The tool also increases the damage by 30. And you could say that's a reference to there's a Rusted Sword. There we go. I was like, I completely forgot the name, but it increases damage of Zacian V by 30. Don't think that's a reference, but potentially. It's definitely a reference to some other things that were callback, but we have Buzzwole GX, which this is not the right art, not the regular art. I'll pull up that one. It has 3 attacks. It has a GX attack, which is not reflected with Hop's Zacian EX at all. However, the 2 regular attacks are. For 1 fighting, you do 30 damage to your opponent's active, 30 to one of their bench. That's literally the exact same thing. And then Knuckle Impact does 160 for 3 fighting and can attack next turn. It's certainly weaker than 240. However, that's similar, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. To pull up the Buzzwole Lycanroc deck. This deck was very popular. It was definitely pretty good. Or I don't know if it was like insanely popular. It was like a popular deck. It was a good deck, and definitely a deck that has some very defining pieces that are definitely referenced in this set. But then we have Salamence EX. This card would be good in Regidrago, but it's Regidrago is rotating. I don't like Salamence EX is 50 to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. I don't think that's a reference to Another Salamence. There's the V and the V Max. This is kind of like the V or yeah, the V. I don't know. It's somewhat similar. Probably just similar thematic stuff though. Then we have Enzu Reshiram. It does 20 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Reshiram's a Pokemon that essentially, not always, but pretty often has the attack Outrage. Outrage does certain damage, then 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. I think that's what it always does. We've seen it on this Reshiram, which is actually, I believe, a callback to this Reshiram, which is the same as this Reshiram. And then the Reshiram in Charizard is a reference also potentially to this Reshiram. Gets kind of weird, but regardless, that is a thing that we see. In Veshram's pretty commonly, and there have been multiple good Veshrams with similar attacks, though it's not the same. So I think it's just similar theming, but regardless, that is something. Now we come to the hops stuff. Actually, no, I'll talk about the Dunsparce EX first. Nothing super like referential here, I don't think. However, its attack is essentially exactly the same as Zoroark's attack from Shrouded Fable. At the time of it being coming out, it will be like the same attack, and we've seen attacks like this before, but it's like the exact same essentially. It's Zoroark technically does more for Vs, which is meaningful now, but with rotation there won't be Vs presumably unless Pokemon pulls out some crazy curveball, and then it is more expensive, which is meaningful, and it's on a different, Pokemon with a different number of prizes it gives, different stuff. But regardless, like super similar attacks, which is I don't know. I'm surprised how similar it is. I don't see any reason why this would be a reference, but it kind of feels like it is. I'm not sure. Then we have Hops Snorlax, which says your Hops Pokemon do 30 more damage, and its effect does not stack. Then we also have um, Hops Choice Band, which is the card I was talking about earlier. Your Hops Pokemon do 30 more damage, and then the attacks cost one colorless less. I don't think the colorless less is a reference to anything. And then we also have um, Postwick, which your Hops Pokemon do 30 more damage. And so now we come to the Buzzwole Lycanroc deck. We talked about Buzzwole GX, and some of the other cards are definitely paralleled too. Diancie Prism Star, Regirock EX, and also Strong Energy, oh, and Beast Energy as well, and then Choice Band are all, well, okay. Choice Band can be used on any Pokemon. Diancie Prism Star, I think is supposed to be like Hops Snorlax. I'm not really sure. Strong Energy is, I think, like Hops Choice Band. I'm not really sure what goes with what, but there's a bunch of damage buffing options. These do not actually all do the same amount of damage buff. It's pretty wide variety, 20, 10, 20, 30, but those are all damage buffing cards that really mostly work with this deck and definitely feels referential, especially what we saw the Buzzwole GX versus Zacian, Hops Zacian EX, but we'll see some other cards very similar as well. But then we have Choice Band, which is, I mean, this is literally, it's like a Choice Band card, Hops Choice Band, but you do 30 more. This you do 30 more to GXs and EXs, which are actually different EXs than the ones in Standard. But regardless, it's literally the same tool and has a similar effect. Obviously, it's a different card, but it's the same thing from the video game. Then you have Hops Cramorant, which says if your opponent doesn't have exactly 3 or 4 prizes remaining, it does nothing. Otherwise, it does 120 for 1. Buzzwole does 120 for 1 if your opponent has exactly 4 prizes remaining. Now it does 30 otherwise, and it's one fighting. There's actually there's going to be a lot of differences in effect of these cards. Buzzwole was super good. Hops Cramorant will not be as good as Buzzwole, I'm pretty sure. However, if you just look at them, they look super similar. They look so similar because it's on similar turns. Hops Cramorant does have an extra turn. In fact, the 3/4 prize thing, I believe, is B string. Yeah, so that's the same prizes at prize turns as B string. Buzzwole's a little different, but Hops Cramorant and Buzzwole are definitely parallels to each other. Then Hops Double says on play you Gust. We've seen cards like this before. We saw Umbreon VMAX, which is a Gust card on play. But then this is definitely a callback to Lycanroc GX because it's played in the same deck. It's a fighting Pokemon. Obviously, this isn't fighting, but this was an all fighting deck. This is mostly colorless. We got Metal. Not exactly sure the typing of the Hops deck, but Hops Double says when you play this, you Gust. Lycanroc GX, when you play this, you Gust. And Hops Double might be an okay attacker. Not really sure. It doesn't seem very good, but it could be used. Lycanroc GX also didn't seem like it doesn't necessarily look like a super strong attacker, though its GX attack is pretty strong. So do keep that in mind. That definitely gave you more reason to attack with it. And then Claw Slash is definitely usable. It was definitely pretty solid. And so, Lycanroc GX was more of an attacker than Hops Double, which probably won't really be an attacker at all. But maybe Pokemon's trying to encourage you to attack with it. Its attack Headbutt is actually similar to Claw Slash. I guess they're just very generic attacks, but they are somewhat similar, and with damage buffs, it can actually be the same damage as Lycanroc GX or surpass it. Then we have, I think that's all the references in this deck, which is like a lot. There's so many cards that are referenced there. Super Potion is coming back. That's a thing. Exchange Ticket is very similar to I think it's like Rotom Dex or something. Certainly some of these trainers are similar to other trainers, but nothing like super directly referential, I don't think. I'm not really familiar with the lore, so there could be connections that I just don't know. Lavenica works with Iono, Ends Castle works with Ends, Postwick works with Hops. Then there's a bunch of other supporting cards. The only one that is definitely referenced is Hops Choice Band. Then there is also this card, this Noivern. I don't know if this is a reference, but it feels like a reference to Yanmega or Yanmega Prime. I'm not exactly sure. Like, I'm not super knowledgeable about what Prime Pokemon are, like, because this is just a Yanmega. So, and I know they're like Prime Pokemon. I don't know why people like they always call it Yanmega Prime, but its name is just Yanmega. Regardless, um, Yanmega has its ability, which says if you have the same number of cards, or no, it's Pokebody, which says if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, the attack cost of each Yanmega's of this Pokemon's attacks is 0. It's kind of weird, but yeah, that's the same thing as Noivern here. It is only this specific attack. Yanmega actually has 2 attacks. The attacks are like completely different. Noivern can do 110 in Confusion, and then Yanmega can do 40 Snipe or 70, which was more like impactful. With This was like a pretty different era of Pokemon. This was, I'd say, maybe 2 instances of power creep ago. It might be more. I don't know. I know that there's one with the tag teams and there's one with the capital EXs. There might have been multiple, and power creep's like a somewhat subtle thing with certain big jumps. But regardless, Yanmega was a decent attacker. Noivern doesn't look super good. They do both have free retreat. They are both weak to lightning, resist fighting. So, and they have the same HP. I don't know. They seem like reference. Like this does seem like a reference. I'm not super sure, but definitely seems like it could be. But anyways, tell me down below how many of these older cards you knew. If there are any that I missed as well. Certainly some of these are more stretches than others. Some of these are definitely references. Some are probably not, and some are just common things. But I'm really excited for this new set because it has so many fun things. I don't know exactly why Pokemon's chosen to put all these references in this set. They usually don't do this. They do some references, but usually it's bigger stretches like with Butterfree or like Maractus or maybe something like Accelgor, which I think is a reference. But anyways, tell me your favorite cards from the set down below in the comments. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell, consider joining the channel if you want to support me. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.